there's a limiting belief in our culture, and possibly a crippling belief in our culture, that you can get something for nothing, or you can get profound cultural changes in the direction that you want without having offsetting cultural costs. And one of the reasons I posted some material on Amazonian shamanism is to remind us that there are deep-level practices in cultures that involve a continuous revivification, or a continuous bringing to life and bringing forward profound and subtle processes of being human, which are so easy to allow to fall into disrepair. My experience with Balinese shamanism, and that experience was very much informed by my early encounters and conversations and studying with John Grinder, who had a tremendous impact on me in the early part of the 1980s, was to desire to understand how traditional cultures managed state and managed consciousness and group identity, group state, intersubjective states through shamanic or ritualistic processes or priestly processes in a pre-industrial way. John, I believe, was very sensitized to those sorts of things in somewhat other contexts, although I think he did have some Balinese experience. He also, I believe, had some African experience as well. And so where I believe his thinking and my thinking converge a great deal is on the idea that there are deeply engraved or deeply encoded and embodied and contained within healthy, meaningful cultures that haven't been overrun or depleted or disorganized by the intrusion of Western technology or the Western cultural practices, such as anything from television to cellular devices and things like that, which do bring benefits, but they also bring terrific costs. NLP, in that earlier time, when we were thinking about those things, seemed to have a great deal more awareness and a great deal more fascination and willingness to directly engage the shamanic processes as shamanic processes, not as so-called shamanic processes in training room settings. So when I did my shamanic training, I went through a Canadian NLP group, and we went directly to Bali, but there was a great deal of preparation that preceded that in California with John and Baba Hari Das, who is a profoundly paranormal sort of Indian, I don't know how you describe this man, a trainer of souls, I suppose. So in the several weeks that I was at Mount Bandana with Babaji, Baba Hari Das, Babaji was very clearly aware, with no announcement on my part or no description on my part, that there was some preparatory development that would be necessary in my consciousness to prepare me fully for the Balinese experience, which would take place later that summer. So in my encounter with Babaji, which involved trance states which were far subtler and far more deeply defined and more skillfully set up than any NLP training I've ever attended or could imagine attending. This guy came from a lineal cultural tradition of deep altered state and deep paranormal awareness. So my experience with Babaji was one of a cultural, I would just call it like a cultural awakening to a different form of consciousness. When I then went to Bali, I was already, by the time I entered and I passed through customs, already I was entering into a deep trance state and multiple trances as I got deeper and deeper into Balinese culture. And then finally, when I was, I don't describe this as formally, but when I was in a meeting with three of the priests, the Padanda, the Brahmana people, the high priests, who clearly were aware that this was a baptism of a sort. This was a baptism into the deeper planes of Balinese culture. I was allowed to enter into and experience in a direct and unmediated way some of the core sort of the core knowledge or the core energies of that culture, which is very, very different than the stuff that they provide to show the public who wants to come and consume Balinese culture as a consumable form of theater. And they are very, very aware of that distinction. And they understand the distinction that we would make in our culture that we call shtick. The Balinese fully understand Las Vegas. They fully understand the need for the Las Vegas production, the gamelan, the dancing, etc. And they understand that the shtick satisfies the easily satisfied Western mind. And for the Westerners who come there sort of as cultural voyeurs, they have arranged to provide them in this sort of unconscious contract with the shtick of Balinese culture. And it's a legitimate part of their culture, but it's the entertainment that satisfies and satiates the Western curiosity, as opposed to the deeper planes where the real stuff happens. And the real stuff has no shtick. It's done in a very different way. It requires no speech. Imagine a trainer that could take you infinitely farther in your process than any of the so-called NLP masters, in a way that NLP masters would give their eye teeth to emulate that. And this is normal for the Brahmana caste to take people at that depth, but they fully comprehend that few people are emotionally or psychologically or intellectually prepared for what they're going to experience. So I was there with a number of people from the West who were presenting themselves and claiming for themselves that level of preparation that I think probably was made possible for me by the great generosity of Baba Hari Das. Other people who had not had that preparatory developmental building of the vessel came along, and they wanted to sort of see what was behind the shtick, what was the deeper stuff that underlay the culture. And when they experienced it, I saw several people, some of whom were promoting themselves in the West as spiritually advanced teacher guru types, Western people, were having nervous breakdowns right before me, or having to drink themselves with arak, the strong alcoholic beverage, drink themselves into near coma states because they were so unable to deal with this shift in what they believed was the basic fabric of reality. Well, thank you very much. If it were not for John Grinder, who provided that hypnosis training at Mount Madonna that allowed me to meet Baba Hari Das and this amazing number of serendipitous connections, I obviously would not have had the readiness for that deeper level Balinese experience. And this returns back to my original point of getting something for nothing. What's happening is these old men and old women who are the keepers and the custodians of these profound states of consciousness are slowly being displaced by Western technology and Western communication devices and entertainment devices. And when we think we're doing NLP at some deep level, no, I have to inform you, and I have to inform you sadly, you are not. You are doing something at a very simple, superficial level, and I honor that, just as I honor the shtick that I saw, the entertainment level of the Balinese culture. But the truth is, and the reason that I posted the material on the Amazonian shamanism, is that is a deep and legitimate part of culture which NLP has lost the capacity to capture, or lost the capacity to work with, because the connection between the ancient lineal participants in that culture are no longer connecting with what's going on in NLP culture. So I believe that NLP culture now is very much tracking the technological communication, BlackBerry cell phone, iPod, iPhone type of culture. And that is moving us forward in dramatic and amazing, remarkable ways. But never lose sight of the indelible fact that for all those gains, something must be lost, something is left behind, something is left uncompleted. There is psychic work and soul work and work that goes to the very depth of your being that is becoming foreclosed or removed from possibility as we are given these great conveniences and these great transportive powers of being multiple places at once. So do please take that warning on. You do not get something for nothing. You do not get rapid, seemingly magical technological change without an equal amount of rapid and perhaps permanent loss of the sort of the rainforests of the soul. And that is not a trivial matter.